Hey, it's Chris, Liege of Games. I am here to tell you a little bit about my specific thoughts on this, the new edition of Ra, and why this game should be in almost everybody's collection. Let's do this. So this is Ra, originally 1999. When I think of this game, I think of the ultimate auction game. When you see auction mechanisms mentioned across the scheme of our hobby, this name ultimately almost always comes up, and it almost always comes up near the top of the list. And there's a reason, because this game is freaking fantastic. This is an absolute Nizia classic. This is one that easily should probably be higher than it is, even though it's in the top Board Game Geek 200. And that's mostly because nowadays we're all in love with the hotness, and we're less in love with the, older stuff. Because especially if it's slightly harder to get, or especially if you don't know somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody that has it, it doesn't end up in your collection. And the aesthetic of the original Ra is not much to sneeze at. So when you have Ian O'Toole doing a redo version of it with 25th Century Games, I mean, you have to give it a second look, because, I mean, look how pretty this is. I mean, we should just put it right here so you can look at it instead of me for the whole video, right? Because it's prettier than I am. But what do you need to know about this? If you're unfamiliar with Ra, let's just break it down for a quick second. Ra is a set collection auction game where you are essentially drawing tiles out of a bag until either you or the drawn tile declares itself auction phase on, and then you go around one round of the people playing bidding, where the winning bidder gets all of said tiles in the middle. Rinse and repeat for 3 rounds. Or the round can end prematurely if you press your luck a little bit too much by drawing too many Ra tiles, moving Ra along the track until he reaches the end. And if he reaches the end, then the round ends prematurely and the last auction does not take place. And then you have essentially 7 different ways, 7 different sets of tiles that are in here that you are going to be scoring from. 6 of them score in all 3 rounds. 1 of them scores 2 different ways in just the 3rd round. And let me be clear, this is the bag for this. I mean, this is fantastic. This is beautiful. And it just works. This is the freaking bag of tiles. Let me be clear. There are a freaking metric ton of tiles here. Yeah, I just did that on camera. I did the Tom Vassell right on camera, right on my lap. And it's freaking amazingly how many there are in this. There are so many Ra tiles that when you first play it with people, they're like, that Ra moving all the way to the end is never going to happen, right? I have a lap full of tiles right now. But it does. And then people are surprised. And then they realize by the second round, halfway through or towards the end of the second round, that, wow, I really need to be judicious on when I'm going to take these. And I can't wait for the whole auction track to fill up, because otherwise you end up like me, where in the last 2 rounds of the last game I played, you get a total of 2 tiles. I'm not going to say I'm a bad Ra player, but I'm a bad Ra player. And you know what? This is one of those games you can be bad at and you can still love. Now look at this freakingly massive piece of wood. Phrasing. I'm sorry about that one. I'm not going to edit that out, though. But look at this thing. This thing is huge. I mean, here's my hand. This thing, look at this. This is the Ra tile. You invoke Ra, and you grab it, and you put it in front of you, right? And so that's the other thing that you need to know. This is the Ra that you're putting on the actual track itself, which, again, is still very good size, bigger than most meeples in any other board game that you would see. And again, the color aesthetic is beautiful. The tiles themselves, in terms of the auction of the bidding tiles, again, are probably some of the nicest I've ever seen as a production copy. And they're just great. They're almost, honestly, a little bit too slick. When we're picking them up and like moving them and swapping them, because here's the trick of this game. If you're familiar with Quacks, if you're familiar with Nidavellier, which is more on the hotness, I'm going to relate it to those games so that you can understand what you're doing here. Is that when you win, say with the 12, because in a, we'll take 3-player game, you only use the tiles between 1 and 13, and you are selectively given a set of them, so you have a few that are higher than other people, but a few that are lower than other people. And you start anywhere with 3 to 4, depending on the player count. And so if I win with the 12, I give my 12 to the center board, then the center board one becomes mine in the next round. So I may be using and winning a 12, but I may be getting the 1 that's out there to begin with in the very first round. So then this one becomes a challenge. And then there's always the dynamic of how much do you press your luck at the end of the round in terms of the Ra and the Ra track, but also, hey, I'm going to bid super low, and do I really want this one when it's only 2 or 3 tiles, or are you willing to let me get it, maybe not knowing if you're going to be able to get one at all in the first place at the end before it finishes. And then there's also the set collections where if you do not get enough pieces of a certain set, they do not score. Or potentially you lose points if you have none of them. So you have to be judicious on when you're going to take stuff that's maybe less than optimal, but also when you just need to take stuff for the sake of taking stuff, and so you make sure you don't lose out on tiles that are unspent, because there's nothing more unfulfilling than finishing a round and having 2 or even 3 of these where they just never got utilized. So that's everything you need to know about Ra in a nutshell. And that's why this should be almost on every shelf if you have any inkling of interest, even if you're a non-auction person like I was prior to this game. Because that was one of the first questions 25th Century Games asked me when they sent me this game. They said, hey, have you played Ra? And I said, not really. And they said, okay, here you go. We think you should try it. And I said, okay. It's never leaving my collection now. This is a keeper forever. That's how good this game is. And again, it plays well at all player counts, and that's the other thing you should be interested in, and it plays in 45 minutes or less. If those last 2 things don't interest you, well, I mean, then you really should look elsewhere. But how many great games do you have that play well at 2 as well as 5? Think about that for a second. There's only one other game I've really played recently, and I'm going to be doing a review on that as well later this month. That's a whole nother conversation, because that's also probably going to be a top 10 game of the year, which may be slightly controversial, maybe not. I'll put this out there as one last note. Ra is to auction tile set collection games as El Grande is to area control majority games. It's that freaking good. It is the granddaddy, grandfather, grand whatever of them all. That's everything you need to know about Ra in a couple minutes. Let me know what you think. Let me know how you feel. And as always, if you have any questions, let me know in the comment section below. Like this, thumb this, and I have a Patreon if you really want to support me in any other way. I'm going to be trying to get a new studio, so any support can help soon. And there you go. Subscribe if you really want. Blah, 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 blah. All the usual stuff at the end there. As always, stay classy. Have a great day. I'll see you around. I really do have a lap full of tiles here, folks. I really did that on camera. That was not empty, see? I'll be cleaning it up for a few minutes afterwards. I'll see you around.